Hi everyone, this is Phil Travis. This is State College of Florida, EUH 1001. This is my little buddy Maxi Paxi. Little Maximus is his name. He was known. He's named after a Roman gladiator during the time of Marcus Aurelius, which we will not be covering this week in class. This week we are going to be covering World War One, and your readings and the weekly presentation primarily relate to the First World War. Pretty fascinating time, I think most of you will agree. World War One was a war of kind of unprecedented proportions in terms of its scale, in terms of loss of life, in terms of technology. Technologies like the machine gun, long range heavy artillery, even the beginnings of air power, as you see the first air raids during World War One, the usage of poison gas, trench warfare, and so forth, tanks as well, all emerged during the First World War. The widespread use of submarines emerged during the First World War, though of course there were submarines used in previous conflicts, like of course the American Civil War. But the technology had been so well refined that it's able to be a highly effective tool of naval warfare, particularly for Germany during the First World War. So this week we will be looking at the First World War. We have our second test this week. There's a study guide up on for the test. Remember all of those terms in the study guide. Just be able to understand the who, what, when, where significance of those terms, and you'll be fine. I recommend using the week to study and prepare, and then taking the test on a Friday or a Saturday or a Sunday at the end of the week when you have plenty of time, when you have a good internet connection and nobody around to bother you. And I think if you prepare and study all week, you'll be fine. The First World War this week. We also have some readings pertaining to fascism developing in the aftermath of the First World War. We'll talk more about that next week when we get to discussing the origins of the Second World War. So this week we'll primarily be looking at the First World War, and we'll be taking our second test. I think that's about it. So we'll make this announcement kind of short today. But I want to give you your factoid. Remember, email me the factoid no later than Wednesday by midnight and get your bonus point added to, as Maxi's decided he wanted to move around. Get your bonus point added to a test score at the end of the term. They all add up to what could be as many as 10 bonus points. So it's a good thing to participate in. Just send me an email with the factoid no later than Wednesday by midnight. It just demonstrates to me that you're watching these announcements, you're keeping up with the class early, and it's also kind of fun, because you learn interesting little factoids about the period we're talking about. So this week's factoid is this: at the end of World War One, as World War One came to a close, the world was beset by a flu pandemic, and this flu pandemic was called the Spanish flu. Is usually how it's referred to. It was a very, very bad pandemic, and it became globally such a bad issue because of interconnectivity, historical interconnectivity, because people were moving about and exchanging and interacting because of the war. Soldiers were being shipped home from abroad. People were moving all over the world at the end of the war, and so this meant that more and more people were who were carrying the illness. Were moving about and interacting with other people, and this caused the flu to spread very widely. Well, the Spanish flu was also a very virulent, it was a bad flu. It had a tendency to kill sort of middle-aged folks. It didn't kill young people and old people nearly as much as it did people in their 30s and 40s, which was rather unusual in how it affected those people. And here's the factoid. So at the end of World War One, the Spanish flu in the United States, which brought back, of course, by soldiers coming home from war, in the United States, the Spanish flu killed within a year upwards of 1 million people, which to that time was more Americans that had died in all American wars to that point combined. So all Americans that had been killed in the Revolution, in the Civil War, in the Mexican-American War, and in the First World War combined, as well as the War of 1812 and these types of things, combined to that point, the death toll from the Spanish flu in 1 year was more. Just over 1 million people died of the Spanish flu in less than a year in the United States. To give you an idea of how bad, a disease outbreak this was, and how much it affected the United States at the end of World War One. And this very much shaped people's perspectives. The end of World War One was not associated with the sort of celebratory parades that you might remember from or imagine associated with World War Two, the end of World War Two. Instead, World War One was not widely celebrated in the streets, and 1918 and 1919 in America, in the United States, was largely a rather bleak time with the Spanish flu. There was a Red Scare, like a fear of communism in the United States because of the recent Soviet Union emerging in 1917. There was, of course, the infamous Black Sox scandal in the World Series, where the Chicago White Sox were alleged to have thrown the World Series for gambling interests. And so it was a very bleak time, and the Spanish flu, because of its tremendous death toll, was a big reason for that. Okay, email me that factoid no later than Wednesday by midnight, and let's have a great week. Test this week, study, prepare, use the study guide, and let's have a great week, guys. All right.